Hermes Trismegistus, the messenger Elizabeth Clare Prophet, said that Hermes' teaching is from which all the teachings have derived. From which all the teachings have derived. It is so simple a teaching, yet it is not easy to understand. So it takes many readings and much meditation to even get a glimpse of the hem of the garment of this teaching. I would tell you that the teaching you heard earlier in the first hour after the novena was from 1993. It said 1981, but that was from 1993. And the understanding of some of the writings of Hermes that Elizabeth Clare Prophet gave. She also gave a sermon in 1981. Many of you have heard of the album, The Emerald Matrix, a very large album that came out in 1981, 1982, and it contains a lot of these teachings. So today, I'd like to use volume 24, number 73 from that period of time, 1981, The Emerald Matrix, The Perfect Light, The Emerald Tablet of the Heart, The Sign of Unalterable Change, and excerpts from the teaching, the sermon that Elizabeth Clare Prophet gave. First of all, she talked about the alchemical manuscripts that we can consult, and said no matter what date or author or language on the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, we find a constant mention of Hermes Trismegistus, who was indeed and sometimes designated the father of alchemy. In a treatise attributed to Albertus Magnus, we are told that the tomb of Hermes Trismegistus was discovered by Alexander the Great in a cave near Hebron. In this was found a slab of emerald that was taken from the hands of the dead Hermes by Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and which had inscribed upon it in Phoenician characters the precepts of the great master concerning the art of making gold. The inscription consisted of 13 sentences, which I will be reading, and is to be found in numerous alchemical works. It is for the most part very difficult to understand, and in this respect closely resembles most of the great mass of the Middle Ages alchemical literature. And the following is cited as the inscription of the Samaric Dean table, and it is to be found in very early manuscripts in various languages. So here are the 13 inscriptions. Firstly, I speak not fictitious things, but that which is most certain and most true. Secondly, what is below is like that which is above, and what is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of the one thing. I'd like to point out that one thing. In my studies, I wanted to understand what that one thing was. You may have noticed in the scripture today from 2 Peter chapter 13, it speaks of the one thing. We go on. Thirdly, as all things were produced by the word of one being, so all things were produced from this one thing by adaptation. Again, the one thing. Fourthly, its father is the sun, S-U-N, its mother, the moon. The wind carries it in its belly. Its nurse is the earth. Fifthly, it is the father of all perfection throughout the world. Sixthly, the power is vigorous if it be changed into earth. Seventhly, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, acting prudently and with judgment. Eighthly, ascend with the greatest sagacity, sagacity meaning having foresight, discernment, making good judgment. So ascend with the greatest sagacity from the earth to heaven, and then again descend to the earth and unite together the power of things superior and things inferior. Thus you will obtain the glory of the whole world, and obscurity will fly away from you. Ninthly, this has more fortitude than fortitude itself, because it conquers every subtle thing and can penetrate every solid. Tenthly, thus was the world formed. 11thly, hence proceed wonders which are here established. 12thly, therefore I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. 13thly, that which I had to say concerning the aspiration of the sun is completed. And that is the 13 precepts of Hermes. Now, understanding them is become the mystery to solve. And so Hermes Trismegistus has many illustrations of him, and one of them is from a book by Manly P. Hall, who was an esoteric writer. And I did not include that particular illustration on the bulletin's artwork, but I like to describe what Elizabeth Prophet says about that picture that was drawn. And she says, we see Hermes standing upon the back of a serpent, Typhon. And Hermes is the personification of universal wisdom, and therefore he vanquishes the dragon of ignorance and perversion. Ignorance being the ignoring of the law, and perversion being the perversion of the law. And to the Egyptian initiates, Typhon, the devourer of souls, signified the lower world, which swallows up the spiritual nature of the individual, who being imperfect is forced to descend from the higher spheres and be reborn into the physical universe. So, to be swallowed by Typhon, therefore, signifies the process of rebirth, from which man can only release himself by vanquishing his mortal adversary. This adversary, the anti-self, is the dragon Typhon. The great ascended master Hermes emerges from mythology as a key member of the Great White Brotherhood, assisting initiates on the path. So this portrait we are describing here, that Elizabeth Prophet is describing of him, is the archetype. It is the initiation of the neophyte or the new student, who must proceed in an orderly manner to begin to slay portions of the dragon, that is, portions or elements of the lower nature of which he can lawfully deal. Ultimately, the last initiation is to slay what we call the dweller on the threshold, which is a conglomerate of all the misused energy that we have ever had through all of our lifetimes. The entire conglomerate of that fallen consciousness, which has devoured the spiritual light. Thus, the soul must rise and ascend to God with prudence. Again, the prudence, the wise caution, and descend back to earth with the sacred fire and the light that he has garnered through the disciplined path. Enter into interaction with his own reality and reach the moment of self-mastery, whereby he can slay the entire identity or the id of the not self. So this picture that we see of Hermes Trismegistus, he carries in one hand the caduceus. Now I'd like to give a little bit of understanding of the caduceus because I myself was mistaken. The caduceus, many think as being the symbol for the medical or health, and it actually is the symbol of Hermes, and it is a rod with two intertwining serpents or snakes and wings at the top. And that the caduceus of Hermes shows is the messenger of God, a winged at the top, and the rod of Asclepius, which was a Greek god of healing and medicine, is actually one rod with one serpent coming up. So it actually, the two is depicted as the caduceus with the two serpents. So back to this description that Mother is giving, we enter into interaction with his own reality, that is Hermes, and reach the moment of self-mastery, whereby we can slay the entire identity or the id again. So we see the caduceus in the one hand of Hermes and the winged rod with two fighting serpents, she calls them intertwined. The signification of the fighting serpents denotes the ultimate tension of the rising energies of the sacred fire along the spiral of being, from the base of the spine to the crown to the third eye. And thus, in one hand, he carries the caduceus, and the other, the immortal emerald tablet, upon whose surface was inscribed in the raised letters, the bas relief, the sum of philosophy. Each one is the symbol of self-mastery and the fifth ray of science, wholeness, and truth. The figure wears the ancient Masonic temple apron, if you see this picture, and is according to the pattern discovered by Balzoni, the eminent Egyptologist. The two small circles in this particular illustration, one depicts the forms and symbols that most closely associate with Hermes. In the upper circle, you see the ibis, the IBIS, which is a curious bird that has characteristics that cause it to be particularly associated with the medical art. We have a lot of these birds down here in Florida. They have a curved beak. You may have seen them in Egyptian art. And this is an ancient mythological bird. In the initiation ceremonies, the Egyptian priests wore the masks in the form of the ibis head to signify they represented the attributes of Thoth or Hermes. The lower circle in this illustration contains the dog, an animal that's always associated with Hermes, supposedly because of its intelligence and devotion. But Elizabeth Prophet goes on to say here that we know, as Chelas of the Great White Brotherhood, we are in the symbol of the dog is the symbol of the dog star, which is the God star, Sirius, which is our home. And thus we have the clue. The Ascended Master Hermes came from the God star Sirius. He passed through the planet Mercury, as he is also known as Mercury, and he came to Earth and delivered to the descendants of Sirius, and that would be us, the seed of Sanat Kumara. And all the learning and knowledge which Elizabeth Prophet says she chronicled in order to give to the people of light and the natives of the God star was that the sword of the spirit, the sword of matter, in the hand whereby they could defeat the anti-wisdom, the anti-knowledge, and the anti-Hermes of the Nephilim gods of the fallen ones who came to planet Earth in their spaceships from the planet Marduk. And we all know that story. And upon the head of Hermes also appears Euresis. It is the sacred asp, ASP, or serpent, denoting the rising of the sacred fire. It is the secret symbol of the constellation Scorpio. The hierarchy of Scorpio are the initiators of the evolving light bearers and the all-seeing eye of God, and the raising of the Kundalini fire. And this represents also the regeneration of the same power. You're going to hear that word in this dictation. We're going to go over regeneration of the same power that in the form of a dragon is helpless under the foot. So the dragon then becomes the conglomerate of the energy misqualified when it is slayed, when the form is broken, and then the energy is released and may be drawn up again as the sacred fire of the mother, as the ascension flame out of the great ascension temple of Egypt. And this happens until we break the mold of the not self, the anti-self, the anti-God or the anti-Hermes. We have a vast portion of God's light bequeathed to us, vested in the anti-self. The masters teach that we go about the slaying of that dragon by the process of transmutation, by the 12 lines of the cosmic clock. We sang the song with Joao Kul. As we know, that was a Hermetic teaching given to us by Mother Mary, we heard, and by dealing with portions of misqualified energy until we have extracted the light of God power, the light of God love, the light of God wisdom, and so forth. And it has been embedded in portions and pockets of that dragon form. And ultimately, the dragon is weakened and the Chela on the path is strengthened for having the restoration of his light. So we must gain, she says, equilibrium and the superiority of the light of the presence when the keeper of the flame, the Chela on the path, no longer faces or fears the entire conglomerate or the dragon of this human creation. He no longer fears his own karma. He no longer fears the planetary dragon or the anti-self that is tied to the personal not self. And therefore, in the courage of truth, living truth, and all that he has learned on the path and the oneness of his soul, with the spirit of the great white brotherhood, he stands as Christ, as the challenger of the Antichrist. So, translating this, she says, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, you then becomes the challenger of the planetary conspiracy of every consciousness of Antichrist, the conglomerate of that dragon, which gives power to the beast of the collective consciousness of the race. And then we'll go on to see that she tells us this becomes the Nephilim conspiracy, which we know is continuing, that's my words, all taken into one, the planetary dragon that gives power to the beast, which is the carnal mind of mechanization man, and therefore the dragon sustaining the not self of the entire planetary body momentum of the mass consciousness. Thus, we take up the great challenge of the community of light bearers, those who delve in to the divine mysteries of the ancient teaching. And this came, for this cause came Jesus Christ, as we are in this Lenten season and we watch the world go by. We come to understand the reason for being, becoming the Christ, and following the steps of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and of Hermes Trismegistus and all the ascended masters, is to bear witness to the truth of the liar and his life, leaving the unmistakable record that the liar will always slay the Christ. And this is the words of Elizabeth Prophet. That record is the crucifixion itself, that none should forget when the Christ is raised up, the crucifiers appear. And so I pondered these words, and I pondered those precepts, the 13 precepts. And I wanted to understand more clearly so I could convey to you some personal experience, and perhaps you too could learn and meditate to become one with this teaching. So I had an experience, and I'd like to bring it up at this time, if you would allow me to share it. This particular teaching of the one thing, it really stuck in my mind. I wanted to understand it. And so I'm going to tell you the story. Last Monday, I work at home, and I work with elderly folks and disabled folks and get them help in their home, and that's my job. I work solely on the phone. I work remotely. I never see them. I never go to their homes as I used to in my old job. And last Monday morning, I had a phone call from one of my clients, and she was very angry. And it seemed that the planetary beast that we speak of in this terminology, sometimes we understand what that planetary beast is when we are actually faced with it. And that the mass consciousness, and I wrote this down because I woke up after this experience and I wrote it all down. So I'm going to read it to you so it comes sort of as a flow of what I got. So it seems that the planetary beast, that mass consciousness conglomerate, comes full force and anger, wrapped up in the conglomerate of one individual in the full unleashing of anger, hatred, and irrationality. This manifested last Monday morning when I took a call from a woman who believed she had been wronged by me, who did unfurl a full-scale verbal assault toward me. It was remarkable in the fact that it seemed so untrue, so unreasonable, and so beyond the realm of reality that I could do nothing but listen, mute the phone, and make calls as the rant continued. For when I did try to interject with but a word, the tirade became even more intense, and the individual accusing me of not allowing her to speak. So when my silence exceeded her expectation of what might be reasonably expected at such provocation, the individual paused and wondered aloud if I were still on the other end of the receiving line. I remained silent, as poking this beast was its secret desire, I thought, to hurl up once again the inflammatory invectives into the atmosphere directed toward me. Now, keep in mind, I am not calling this woman a beast. I am calling the energy that was coming forth from her the beast. So I go on. I began to think of Kathumi's teaching that I had heard the day before in Reverend Shirley's service. I realized that the beast had to release this energy, but at the same time must be subtly and carefully subdued, increment by increment, of the momentous tower of darkness that was spiraling out of control before me. So that equilibrium, which Elizabeth Prophet spoke of, said that mandates or necessitates the full grasp on the mass of the vessel of one's Christhood, which in the story of Odysseus, he clung to in the midst of the storm on the ship. And it became a tangible light-filled mantle of understanding instead of the defensive posture which would more organically occur in such an attack. I breathed in and out several times. I then unmuted myself and asked very slowly, "May I speak now?" More words came from the individual, but they were fading, as this was not an equal match of rules and civility. Speaking slowly and deliberately, I began to unravel the accusations, and I stated the facts one by one of the situation. I repeated myself. I paused. I asked the individual if she understood the information I had just been provided to her. And slowly and ever so gradually, it seemed the beast, the energy, seemed to have begun to relax and speak in a softer tone. Gradually, it seemed that it almost began to lay down by my feet. And as we made a plan and a date for the next communication, the call ended in as much peace as I could have hoped for. And the beast was now subservient and almost a submissive abeyance to the small cup of kindness that I had been reminded to offer that day. And I was reminded during Reverend Shirley's teaching last week that I helped with. I said in the pastoral prayer, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." And Kuthumi does give a teaching about that. And he says the following. He says from volume 11, number 22 from 1968, Kuthumi says, "Do not qualify, if one would pray, 'Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace,' then he must be prepared to submit to the will of peace. The handiwork of service must be offered generously without thought of reward or personal glamour." So there we are. The call compelled the answer. I asked for the Lord to give me this understanding of this peace commanding presence. And so it was. And so I remembered the Hermes Trismegistus, not as some ancient, distant, mystical being, but as the bringer of truth in all of our beings, to give us the solving of an enigma, a mystery wrapped in all of our being, but so simple that it yet becomes obvious when once has contemplated its very essence. So what did I glean from that experience was, it can be very obvious that we are triggered by many situations in the world, whether it be something on the news, a family member, someone in the traffic, someone in government, some situation. How can that be? And how can that happen? But this particular lesson of the one thing, and what is the one thing to me? The one thing is bringing back to the energy of God and preserving the energy of God, preserving the energy of the light that you have invoked over lifetimes, and to be able to keep that and preserve it as a precious element, like the gold that we may alchemize from our beloved Hermes teaching. So going into volume 24, number 73, I'd like to read some excerpts from that dictation. The sign of the emerald tablet of the heart, the sign of unalterable change. And I had read during the teachings earlier, the first paragraph, I am indeed Hermes Trismegistus. I am a light, an eternal light that has burned brightly in the scene of thy passage through earth when we gave 7002. I am immortal. He says that thou art immortal, O man, and that this mortal coil is not, never was, nor indeed can be thine own identity. We are not this body this hair, this face, that we preen, that we wash, although it is important to take care of one's body and one's being and physical being, it is not the sum of us. Hermes goes on to say, thou art cast down in the veils of limitation, governed by mortality, cast down only by thine own downward thought and thought transference to matter, whereby the alchemy of mind is become the alchemy of thine own self-created matter microcosm. And therefore thou hast descended by law to the lowest level of thine own creation, that thou might fire it with reality, or withdraw the fire and separate it from the earthly. In so doing, the downward creation must collapse and the upward creation must rise. Light will always want to ascend. And he goes on to say, thus we are here together, I the above, thou the below. And that is the main precept of his teaching. To survey the scene which thou hast created in ignorance and perverseness, the scene that others have also created for their rests. And that word rests is the remnants or the relics, that part that is left over, the aggregate, and it is what is the sum of the total, a conglomerate of downward thoughts of the many. Thus observing the plight of souls who took flight to experiment with free will, I, Hermes, messenger of the gods, and also the one called Mercury, have tarried lo these tens of thousands of years, and beyond that there might be a torch of remembrance and inscribing of the law upon the emerald tablet of thy heart. For lo, the emerald tablet in the secret chamber of the heart is even now unveiled by thine own holy Christ self, the priest, philosopher, scientist, who officiates at the altar of unalterable change. Unalterable change. What cannot be changed within us? The flame of God. We can increase it. We can make it become larger. It can become a larger part of our being, but it is what sustains us, no matter how tiny it may be, to sustain this life that we have here on the physical plane. He says it is that change that must come, that must be, because I am, and because thou art also the God-man. It remains for thee, O alchemist of the sacred fire, to differentiate the elements of earth and fire, the atom Padmon, who is of the earth earthy, and the one who is of the heavenly. It remains for the application of the sacred fire, by name the violet flame, for the separation to occur. And the separation cannot occur except regeneration occur simultaneously. And thou canst not ascend without regeneration. Thou canst not identify as the immortal one without the rising spiral of the inner light. And so Hermes says, therefore I say, read the emerald tablet of the heart. Study the alchemy of thyself, for upon the tablet there is written not only the alchemy of the macrocosm, but the precise uses and misuses of the steps of precipitation, whereby thou hast wrought both the self and the anti-self. Regeneration then is the sign of those who are endowed with a living flame. Think of that. Without the living flame, there can be no life on this planet. Without that living flame, nor the violet light, nor the resurrection spiral can appear. Thus, those who are marked by the sign of unalterable change are those who are also marked by the white cube, the philosopher's stone, the stone which the builders rejected, that it's become the chief cornerstone of thy temple, and that is your holy Christ self. Those who have the abiding presence of the Lord, Yahweh, Vavhe, must recognize the immutable nature of this I am that I am, and be about their Father's business. Ye are his workmanship, and ye are his workmen. Let the Father be known in the Son, even as I am known to my own Son. And then he talks of the blessed hearts, Tat, Sat, Tat, which we sang the song. Even the vibration of the word of the sun emanation is a kindling light. What wilt thou bring, O mortal, to the altar of change? What wilt thou bring? And I thought about that as we are in this Lenten season where we're known to have some kind of giving up of something, of surrendering something. Maybe we think about what wilt thou bring? All except, says Hermes, the inner fire must remain without. Bring the fire, bring the elements for, bring also the former experiments of thine alchemy, unsuccessful attempts to forge the light-hearted one. The light-hearted one. We want to have a light heart. And his recommendation of how to become lighthearted is to let us see how the violet flame with the ingredient of the ruby ray and the action of the mathematics of the emerald tablet can result in sacred transmutation and the deriving of that purified essence, even the refined gold of permanent selfhood. For some, you will do well to take with you an ounce of precious substance. For others, you will scarcely be able to contain or carry the gold that comes forth once you discover the secret of the ages, the dissolution of the not self without loss of the real self. So that is the unalterable change. We keep the light, we discard the perversion of the light. Today, says Hermes, the practice is still prevalent of the casting out of the self in its entirety, for men have not learned to extract the light. When I thought about extracting the light, I thought about mining for gold. And I thought about the price of gold. Right now, it's over $3,000 an ounce. So it's become much more precious. So if you have ever heard of people extracting gold or mining for gold, you know it's very difficult. It's very difficult to find it. And it could be a whole area that says that they found gold there, but it might be just a mere 3 inches in the ground. So this extracting the light, you have to be very careful. Hermes says they do not know that they were created by God as God manifestations. They do not understand that indwelling as the light matrix of the emerald. There is absolute truth and a reality that far transcends the vessel that is temporary. And he says, all who have come forth in the name of the ancient wisdom, in the name of the ancient of days, have not only proclaimed, but also demonstrated the laws of immortality. We have been passing the torch of this divine alchemy for millions of years upon earth, for we have known that except our brotherhood convey it, the sense of the eternality of the self would be lost in the sense of the mortality of the fallen ones. Think about that. Without this inner teaching, this inner knowing, this understanding, how would you understand or make sense of this world? He goes on to say, who have nowhere else to go except in the reduction of the coil of selfhood to its native nothingness. Nowhere, says Hermes, would there be the proclamation of eternal life except the ascended masters descend, taking on then the likeness, the form, the body of a man, and therefore dwelling in the Son of Man, that the Son of God might appear. I'd like to go on and skip a little ahead to part of this dictation, where Hermes talks about the 10 perfections of the law. He says, I come then to bring forward to your remembrance, to your chakras, the memory of the appearance of Sanakumara, the memory of your own identity in God, the desire of your soul to conquer by the test of the 10, each perversion of the 12 gates of the temple. Study then the law of life as taught by Gautama Buddha. Understand well the 10 perfections of the law which he has delivered to you, and know what is the meaning of the test of the 10 through the 10-petaled lotus centered in the solar plexus, the place of the sun below the heart and the matter sphere. This flaming sun center and its tenfold path is the focusing of the light of Aton in matter. So you may be familiar with this book, Quietly Comes the Buddha. And on page, in this particular edition, on page XIX, Roman numeral XIX in the introduction, it gives you the 10 key virtues or perfections to the path, which Hermes is speaking of, and I'd like to just read them. It says in this paragraph, listen, Buddhahood is not realized in a day. It's a 10-step program. You take on Buddhic qualities in increments. We've heard that. There are 10 key virtues or perfections to this path. You can study them and incorporate them into your life. This was my prayer to cultivate these qualities, and this is Buddha speaking here. Om Buddhas of the 10 directions, may I fulfill all perfections. And here are the 10 precepts. Alms, precepts, renunciation, wisdom, courage, patience, truth, resolution, goodwill, and indifference. Grant that I may realize them fully and attain supreme Buddhahood. Hermes goes on to say, by the establishment of the sun of one desire within the desire body, all energy and life that you have ever sent forth will rush homeward to the center of that place of the sun. One-pointedness of desire to be God, his emissary, his messenger, his manifestation. The one-pointedness results in the immediate manifestation of the great central sun, the great sun disk. And we have a decree, the great sun disk, to meditate upon that solar plexus. He says, centering then in the desire body, all karma, positive and negative, all energy ever qualified by the word or the work returns to the sun for redemption. Therefore, in the action of the heart, in the light of the heart, and its 12-fold path, in the meditation and initiation of the secret chamber of the heart, generate and regenerate light, 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 and let it be the expansive light of the great sun disk that calls home all the rays of the desire body that have gone forth as covetousness or envy or jealousy or ignorance. And the emanations of inordinate desire include all of the misappropriations of the 12 solar hierarchies as we study on the cosmic clock. And therefore, he says, let them return and see to it that when they return, there is a fiery furnace of solar light burning there in the place of the sun, that they might be consumed, and the radiation of the purest desire of thy soul to be God may emanate to all the earth, and all evolutions of God may feel the remagnetization of divine purpose within that body. So we have read the Quietly Comes the Buddha 10 directions, the test of the 10. And he says, Hermes says, this test of the 10 is the path of selflessness, surrender, and service through sacrifice. Walking this path, you may set the great example. For unless the children of the light who are of God but have a lesser attainment of light shall master the desire body and the desire emanation, they themselves cannot, nor will they see eternal life. But they will see that wrong desire leadeth unto death. Thus, should they descend lower in vibration than the sun center of the desire body, without regeneration, without rectification of waywardness, their souls would be in jeopardy to be swallowed up by the negative coil so prevalent and momentous upon earth. So he gives us some affirmations, which I'd like to give together. I'll say them and then you can repeat after me. He says, let the children of the sun hitch their chariots to God desire. Let them be taught at an early age to master desire in all of the tastes and sensations of the senses. Let them be taught to identify with the inner light. Let them affirm, and after me, I am immortal. I am immortal. I am a manifestation of God. I am a manifestation of God. I am the Son of Light. I am the Son of Light. I am the emanation of the God star Sirius. I am the emanation of the God star Sirius. Light and life are my joy. Life and light and life are my joy. And I demagnetize the coils of death. And I demagnetize the coils of death unto the victory of God's love where I am. Unto the victory of God's love where I am. Hermes says, I therefore counsel you to endow the matter self, each of its vehicles, with the violet flame, with a call to the resurrection fires, with a mantra, I am the resurrection and the life. I counsel you to consider what is the necessary formula of being, and I call to your hearts to intensify devotion. And he says, when you gather in conclave and offer invocations to the word, you establish the force field whereby the truth may be given, and there are requirements of the law, the coming together, the building of the spiral, the oneness of hearts, the violet flame platform. And therefore we come on the fourth day of this gathering and this teaching when it was given. And we have just begun to unveil fragments that lead to the whole of the inner tablet. So I leave you with another part of this teaching as we conclude this portion of this very extensive teaching, where Hermes says, in these hours you are so surfeited with teaching and so much light and all that is already in store in the archives that is not always easy for you to understand. How much more could be given and how much more should be given, even though beloved Alpha has declared that the work of the messengers is complete. Blessed hearts, this is also a mystery of the divine alchemy, for the work is complete in the setting of the formula of life, but the deciphering of the formula must remain the work that is ongoing. And if you cannot crack the formula, how will it avail you? So he says, therefore it remains the love fires of the heart of devotion, and those who stand at the top of the pyramid to melt with a fervent heat, which comes from 2 Peter chapter 13. That fervent heat is the formula that we have transferred, that you might come to understand more of the meaning of the Om Tat Sat Om. And that fervent heat is what we feel when we give the violet flame, when we transmute the situation of all the energies that are not of thee. This is the process of regeneration. It's the process of refinement of one's personal energies and consciousness. And it's accomplished through the consecrated daily use of the violet flame, and is also suggested that we learn to use the creation of the cloud of our beloved alchemist, beloved Saint Germain, and his 2 books on alchemy. And we do have that opportunity every 4th Saturday to give the creation of the cloud. So we go on now to seal this teaching, this final word, as we prepare for our Holy Communion. Our beloved Hermes says, I therefore impart to you my communion, which is the communion with all saints through my heart, one in adoration with the heart of the Lord Christ, to partake of the Christ consciousness of the entire spirit of the great white brotherhood. And as you assimilate that word, know that it is a magnet of the precipitation of your own Christhood and the sealing of our fellowship and the flame of the divine alchemy. Amen.